What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Brendan Glasheen joined by Sean Zerillo and Billy Ward. We are here for a UFC betting preview, getting you set for UFC 304. Edwards Muhammad round 2. The rematch is here, coming to you this weekend in England. It's a late night start, at least for the folks over across the pond. They're going to start this one pretty late, but 10 o'clock pay-per-view main card, 10 Eastern that is. Prelims start at 8 o'clock over on the ESPN family of networks. All right, Sean, we've got Muhammad as the underdog here at plus 205. Edwards the favorite. How do you break this one down and give us your context as it pertains to the fact that we got a rematch fight here for the championship?
Yeah, so this fight took place originally in March 2021 in the UFC Apex. And Leon was pretty much dominating the first round until eye-poking Belal got warned and then did it again, and the fight was stopped because Belal couldn't continue. But it seemed in the moment like Belal was sort of taking the way out because he was getting dominated. I believe he had taken that fight on short notice as a late replacement, and it was a main event, and things just weren't going his way early. Now, the longer this fight extends is where I think Belal could have success. His recent matchups, he's on a long winning streak. He's 36 years old. I think he's a very underrated fighter, and I have largely bet on Belal instead of against him throughout this recent run. I think the only fight I bet against him was the Gopher-Burns fight, where Burns was hurt in round 1 and wasn't really 100% effective after that point. But Belal has largely faced grapplers, especially since that Leon fight. He's only faced guys who he has an advantage, a clear advantage over in at least one particular area of MMA, either wrestling or striking, against grapplers who are better grapplers than him, but he was able to keep the fight standing, like Sean Brady, and knock him out. Other than that, he faced one-dimensional strikers like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who he was able to suffocate. Leon is by far the most well-rounded opponent he's faced on his recent round of opponents. Serious step up in competition. The way better athlete. Leon's 3 inches taller. He's got a 2-inch reach advantage. He's much stronger in my mind. I think his cage wrestling is phenomenal. His clinch work is tremendous. The way he fires knees and elbows in the clinch, Belal is not going to be able to do his typical crotch sniff, consolidate the legs, and look for takedowns up against the fence. Leon is going to be striking aggressively in those positions. He's going to be landing elbows to the side of the head, going to be landing knees as Belal goes for those double legs. So I think it's just a terrible matchup in general for Belal, but I do think he could potentially work himself back into the fight later. You saw Leon make mistakes, slow down late in his fight against Colby Covington, was clipped late in his fight against Nate Diaz, almost KO'd. If Nate had actually followed up on that, probably would have KO'd him. But, you know, he had the late knockout against Usman. It's not to say his effectiveness drops off in the late rounds. I just do think he becomes more vulnerable the longer the fight goes. And if Belal is able to push a pace, tire him out, force him to consistently defend takedowns, I think the fight momentum could swing in the later rounds, because I do think Belal has the better gas tank. That's the one area I would give him an advantage in. We didn't see it in that first fight because the fight ended inside of 5 minutes, and also Belal on short notice that day, like now coming in off of a full camp, fully prepared for this fight. That's the one way I see him winning, is potentially stealing the fight late, either with a late finish or just getting the final 3 rounds with wrestling. But I think it's a very low percentage outcome. And the way I'd prefer to bet this fight is Leon on the finish only money line at minus 265, the same price essentially as his regular money line. I give him substantially more finishing equity in this fight. If he's the finisher, if the fight finishes, I should say, I think 40% of the time, 40% of Leon's condition is a finish. I'd say closer to 15% of Belal's is a finish. So maybe, the pricing relative to how I priced that out or how I projected that out is right at minus 265, but I really just don't see Belal finishing him. I think it would be one of the bigger surprises in recent memory if Edwards gets finished by Belal in England. So Leon finish only money line. His knockout prop interests me as well at plus 330. I just thought he showed very little respect for Belal striking in that first fight. He was really walking him down. Leon is normally very patient, and he was super aggressive. Granted, that was in the Apex, smaller cage, going to force action a little bit more, but it seemed to me he had a different mentality in that fight. He was much more aggressive and coming forward much more freely than he normally does against opponents. I really just didn't seem like he respected anything that Belal was throwing at him. So Leon inside the distance, and then his finish only money line the way it plays.
Okay, excellent. So for this welterweight title fight, Billy, total rounds is priced at 4.5, and that kind of lends to something you guys have talked about before. But Billy, it seems, Billy, based on your luck ratings write-up as well over at actionnetwork.com, there are a lot of ways that you might want to play this particular fight.
But yeah, no, I mean, if this were in a main event, probably wouldn't be one I'd be betting at all, which you don't have to bet main events just because they're the last fight on the card, right? If you don't see you have the edge. I was kind of interested if the line swung any more where you could get a better price on Belal, I'd be kind of interested because he is underrated. He said about the first fight that it was, part of the strategy and he was going to build as the fight went on. He was conserving energy. I don't know how true that is. You kind of have to say that when you're getting into a rematch against a guy who took the round from you. As of right now, I've got two angles. I like Leon Edwards by decision at plus 100. My thought here is since becoming the champion, he's been markedly less aggressive and trying to retain his belt. And that makes a certain bit of sense because when you're working to a title shot, you have to impress people enough that they give you a title shot. Once you have the belt, you just have to keep winning fights and you keep getting those pay-per-view points on your, check at the end of the night. So I think there's an element of that where it's the GSP thing. We were talking about GSP off air. Mm-hmm. George St. Pierre as champion was taking the smartest, safest path to retaining his belt, not necessarily hunting for finishes or hunting for aggressive things. I see a little bit of that with Edwards. Then along the same lines, if you like Belal, the plus 5.5 point spread kind of aligns with what Sean said, where if he's going to have success, it's going to be later. Steal a round or two. Honestly, maybe just win some rounds with some kind of boring cage pushing or top control. Belal's never been the most exciting fighter, which is why it took him so long to get a title fight. But he's got it now, so who cares about being exciting? So it just depends on, if you're confident and want to root for Leon, Edwards by decision to even money, I think is fairly logical. And then on the other side of that, Belal plus 5.5 is minus 110. So I prefer that to his money line. It's one of those fights where I think Belal does better than the money line implies, but it's really hard to see him winning it outright. So how else are you going to bet it?
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy with grappling upside at plus money. Like it's, that's the pretty standard way we would lean. I see him getting takedowns. I just don't see him holding them for very long. Leon was scrambling up from Usman, who is better top control. And I just think it's a bad matchup for Belal. Leon's just the bigger, better athlete. And Belal has been bullying guys who are older, on the decline, late in their careers. He's the older fighter here. Leon is the quicker, better, more explosive athlete. So just it's such a shift in style, not in style, but in athleticism relative to what Belal has been facing in his recent fights. He's finally not the better athlete.
Yeah, and I truly think his ceiling here is like a very boring, grinded out fight where he doesn't have which your finish only money line makes a ton of sense if you're comfortable laying that much juice, because Belal's ceiling is like everyone booing as he slowly grinds him down along the fence for 25 straight minutes.
Maybe even
Edward obviously has upside.
Belal by split might be an interesting prop to poke if you like the Belal side, because that seems like a large part of his win equity is winning a very tight decision.
Mm-hmm.
And on the road, you're likely to get one scorecard for Leon if it is a close fight. So.
Okay, on to the heavyweight title fight. We have Tom Aspinall as the significant favorite at over minus 400, and Curtis Blaydes at plus 320. The round prop at just 1.5 rounds. Very similar to Edwards and Muhammad. You can get that 5.5, the plus 5.5 or the minus 5.5 as it pertains to the a spread for the fight. All right, Zerillo, what do you think of this one here as far as how you want to approach it?
Yes, this is another rematch from July of 2022. Tom Aspinall blew his knee out 15 seconds into the fight, so they're going to rematch now. But Aspinall was about minus 170 in that first fight. Now, a couple years later, he is minus 400. What has changed? Nothing. He won the interim belt. And I think he's likely, or the likeliest outcome here is Aspinall to win in round 1, like he does in most of his fights. But Tom Aspinall is 0-2, past the 7.5 minute mark in his career. Granted, those fights were in 2015 and 2016, a long time ago. I'm sure he's leveled up substantially since then. But even in his fight against Andrei Arlovski, went for a takedown immediately in round 2 because he was huffing and puffing a little bit. You know, I don't think his cardio is fantastic, but he has tremendous athleticism for a heavyweight. He's so much quicker, moving faster with the hands than most of these guys at heavyweight because he literally moves like a 265-pound middleweight. He's just quicker. And Blaydes is the better wrestler, but Tom has the better jiu-jitsu. He comes from a jiu-jitsu base. His dad, I believe, was a jiu-jitsu champion. But his boxing is his best skill. And Blaydes is often too comfortable striking, especially early. Curtis Blaydes should try to wrestle from the outset, get on top of him immediately, and try to tire him out, drag him to deeper waters. He's probably not going to. He's probably going to play punchy-kicky for a little bit. And if he does, I think he gets knocked out within the first 2.5 minutes. He doesn't have a good chin, and Tom connects with everybody. He finds his range before the fight even starts. You'll see when they, well, actually, it's not. Yeah, they will probably bring them to the center of the cage for like the ceremonial referee introductions, right, that they do before title fights. So Tom, in that moment, always puts his hand on his opponent's shoulder, and it looks like this friendly gesture. He's just gauging range, and he's able to do it against pretty much everybody. I think Pavlovich or somebody like put the hand off the shoulder because they caught on to it. But yeah, he's very intelligent. He's a very educated striker. But I can't ignore the price adjustment relative to the first fight. I mean, Blaydes went from plus 170 to plus 400 or plus 300. So I think his biggest win condition for Blaydes is getting out of that first round and flipping the tide in his favor against the tiring opponent. So live after round 1 is where I'd target Curtis Blaydes. I'd love to bet Aspinall round 1 into a live bet on Blaydes. The price just isn't good. It's minus 110 on Tom Aspinall to win inside of round 1. Again, I think it's the likeliest win condition by far, but I don't know if I want to lay minus 110 on a fighter to win in the first round. That's a little hairy. I'd almost rather lay juice on the under 1.5 and get them starting potentially back on the feet at the start of round 2 as well. But wouldn't chase the KO prop either. You know, if Blaydes is going to grapple, Tom could submit him. Tom has really good jiu-jitsu. We just don't see it come into play very often because he's usually knocking people out very quickly. But yeah, I think the story of this fight is clearly the price adjustment relative to the first fight and what the hell happens if this gets outside of round 1. And I think the answer is Curtis Blaydes is the side. So Blaydes, I think Blaydes are pass from a money line perspective for sure. Aspinall finish props and then live bet on Blaydes.
What do you think, Billy? I mean, you think this is a pretty fair priced fight right now with the current price? I mean, Aspinall's number's gone up since you posted your luck ratings too.
Yeah, it's moved enough that I don't think I would still say it's exactly a fair price.
Okay.
At the same time, I'm not rushing out to bet Curtis Blaydes money line. The one thing that has changed, at least that we could see, is both of those guys fought Sergey Pavlovich since they fought each other. Aspinall knocked out Pavlovich. Blaydes was knocked out by Pavlovich. I'm not trying to do MMA math, but if you're adjusting your power rankings or whatever in your head, that plays a factor. But no, I totally agree with Sean's logic here, and I'm thinking along the same lines. It's a bit of a cop-out bet. I'm going to own this, but Blaydes in the decision-only market at minus 140, I think he should be like minus 1,000 in the decision. Not really, but he should be hugely favored in the decision-only because ask yourself, if I told you ahead of time this fight 100% gets to a decision, what did that fight look like? It looked like Curtis Blaydes boring wrestling and hold them along the fence. Because if they're doing anything exciting, it certainly favors Aspinall. On the longer shot, you mentioned it as well, Sean, but Tom Aspinall by sub, pretty big plus money. Mm-hmm. He's one of the few heavyweights that even tries to go for submissions. You know, most of the guys will just try to use grappling to get on top and punch. And especially in his regional fights, I love the kind of submissions he goes for. It's kind of heavyweight only stuff where I'm just powering through your arm because I'm bigger and stronger and longer than you. But he doesn't give up the position to get a submission. He's not diving for arm bars. He's not stepping out of mount for head and arm chokes, which can sometimes get guys caught. I like that element of his game. I think if you want just something fun, and you can play that with the Blaydes decision only, obviously, and hopefully get it refunded, that's one that I'd be interested in as well. But yeah, Blaydes live makes a ton of sense. The decision only, even if Blaydes wins, probably gets voided because you'd imagine if he makes it that far, round 3, 4, 5, he'd probably get a finish somewhere in there. But again, if it goes to a decision, how did we get there? I think it's pretty clearly Curtis Blaydes on top for most of the fight.
Yeah, I mean, the fight's minus 1,010 inside the distance. So it's,
Right.
a 10% chance that bet even probably activates at any point. No, I think that's a sharp bet, Billy. And if Aspinall is doing enough to win a decision, if he's landing enough damage to win a decision, he's probably knocking Blaydes out. Like, Blaydes isn't surviving that damage for 25 minutes. So, yeah, I completely agree with the assessment of the decision-only line. Blaydes should be minus 250.
We'll stay on the main card and just work our way to the featherweight fight between Arnold Allen and Chikadze, who is plus 180 on the money line. We'll figure we'll just do that before we move on to the dogs and props and then best bets. We'll just stay right in line. So there is a bit of an age discrepancy here, Zerillo. Chikadze is 35. Arnold Allen is 30. So what does your analysis tell you here? What does your model tell you for this one?
Yeah, Allen needs to grapple in order to cover his price tag in this fight, because if he just decides to strike it out with Giga Chikadze for 15 minutes, it's going to be extremely competitive, if not favor Giga. Giga's longer. He has a 4-inch reach advantage on the arms in terms of punching. He also has, I'm sure, the longer legs as well, and that is where he makes his mark. Is he's the better kicker in this matchup. He's one of the best kickers in the sport. And Allen doesn't really throw a ton of leg kicks. So you sort of have a guy mostly kicking against a guy mostly throwing punches. Now, Allen is the hometown fighter, landing the head strikes, going to be getting more oohs and ahs from the crowd and probably more deference from the judges, in those striking exchanges. He's also younger. He's the more explosive athlete, hits a little bit harder. But if he wants to actually look like a minus 220 favorite, he should wrestle, because Giga comes from glory. He's spent most of his professional fighting career as a kickboxer, and the takedowns and the grappling defense and all of that stuff was added in later in his career. And saw him get immediately taken down by Calvin Kattar. And once you take Giga down, he starts to tire out a little bit too. He doesn't have the best cardio either. He's also late in his 30s, coming off of a groin injury. Who knows how much cardio work he was able to put in for this fight. So I think the stylistic, the spot, all of it favors Allen. I just don't love him having to cover a minus 220, minus 250 price tag by grappling, considering he hasn't had to grapple against anybody in a long time, or hasn't had the ability to grapple against any of his opponents in a long time. He's mostly been getting guys he's going to end up striking it out with. So I don't like betting, as Billy and I discussed before the podcast. Billy said it. Billy doesn't like laying juice on a guy to do something that they haven't done before, that they don't regularly do. If Allen was plus 180 and I'm like, he just needs to grapple to win this fight, all day. Absolutely. Minus 220, different story. Betting on him to do something that he's not typically implementing in his game plan. So see a lot of Allen submission bets this week. I get it, because that's where the grappling upside lies. It's just not something that he really goes for. So I'm worried he's going to make this fight closer than it needs to be. But if I'm picking two guys this weekend who I think are pretty safe favorites, and I want to stick them in a parlay together, it will probably be Leon Edwards and Arnold Allen. Two guys, just looking at the card initially, like, which two I think are the two safest guys to win. I think it might be them. So may have a parlay ultimately with Leon and Arnold Allen, but we'll see. I don't want to force anything, and it'll probably be small, if anything. But yeah, I like Allen to win the fight. I think the UFC wants to give him a win, coming off of two tough fights against Movsar Evloev and Max Holloway, both of which he was extremely competitive in. So it would be odd to see him take a third straight loss here, considering the level he's rose to and the quality of fighter I think he is. But he can make it tougher than it needs to be.
All right, Billy, what do you think? Chikadze and Allen, priced at 2.5 rounds as well.
Yeah, I'm tempted to pull the trigger on Giga here, but there's a couple things holding me back. One is the torn groin that he suffered in December. Shauna alluded to. He was supposed to fight last December, pulled out for that reason. I have no idea whether that was like a severe off the bone whatever thing where he couldn't train at all, or a fairly minor injury. We just don't know. The other thing is Giga's kicking game is going to be trickier against Ardelean, who primarily fights southpaw, because by turning the opposite way, he's shielding that liver that Giga likes to kick. That makes it a little bit tougher to do the stuff he normally does. But yeah, beyond that, I'll take plus money on a guy executing a game plan that we're not confident he's going to do. Not going to lay juice. We see this like football bettors and fantasy players all the time, is if the coach would have just thrown like he should have, we're not betting on what they should do. We're betting on what they think they will do. In this case, in front of a home crowd, all fired up, is Ardelean going to get in there and brawl at least a little bit? Probably. So it's a pass for me for those reasons. But again, I'd be tempted on Giga if there weren't some drawbacks and some questions about his fitness right now.
On the feet, I should mention, Allen just needs to crowd him, eliminate that reach advantage. You have the power advantage, and he's happy to get inside and brawl. The Dan Hooker fight was an all-timer. So I think he just needs to crowd him. If he's going to strike it out, just don't stand at range and let him kick you. Get in his face and pressure him and make him go backwards where he can't kick you.
All right, there you go. So there's another main event or main card breakdown from the guys. Okay, consensus underdog for the card this week. Zerillo, Rodrigues is the target. Why?
Gregory, Hobocop, Rodrigues, Barack Obama's doppelganger. We love RoboCop around here, and I think if this is just a striking fight, it's kind of a coin flip where Rodrigues has the lesser chin, which is why you would favor Duncan. Duncan better hardware, longer reach. But Gregory has a severe grappling advantage here, and defaulting back to grappling advantage of plus money. But as I stated first, like if they strike it out, I don't think the price is that wrong. I'd maybe make Duncan 60% minus 150 in a pure striking fight just because he has the better hardware, not because he's the better technical fighter. I mean, he is the better technical fighter, but not for that reason, because of the better hardware. But RoboCop has the grappling upside, and he doesn't always pursue it, but he usually pursues it at least once per fight. The problem is he doesn't have the best cardio either, and I think he's well aware that once he explodes like 2 or 3 times for takedowns, that's it for his energy for the fight. So he tries to be relatively conservative as to when he goes. But when he does go for the takedown and switches to the back, he goes all out for it. And it's usually his round as a result. So I think you could almost give him 1 round purely on grappling. Maybe a second round if he pursues it, if not a 50-50 striking round. I think CLD, Christopher, Leroy, Duncan will have the better cardio in round 3. But if he's forced to grapple here for the first 10 minutes, I'm not confident in that. So I like this fight to end inside the distance. I think it's fairly binary. I don't like RoboCop's chin. I also think CLD has a big grappling deficiency, and Rodrigues can take his back, choke him out. CLD taken down by Armin Petrosian, who's a kickboxer, controlled by Petrosian. Rodrigues, if he defaults to what is his best skill against the guy who's more of a karate-style kickboxer, I think he should be favored, because I think he has, in a grappling fight, I think he's minus 400, minus 900, 80 to 90%. In a striking fight, I think he's 40%, 45%. So add it all up, this is a 50-50 fight, or at least much closer to it for me, if not outright favored Rodrigues. I just am worried about the hardware, the age, him getting clipped and dying, which is why I actually don't mind playing both Rodrigues and the inside the distance, because you're kind of, to me, free rolling. And I would give him, going back to the last fight where I said if Tom Aspinall, or 2 fights back, if Tom Aspinall is landing the shots that he needs to land to win a decision, it's very likely that he's getting the knockout. I think same goes for Duncan here. If he's landing the shots that he needs to win a decision, he's likely KOing RoboCop. You could outkick him. You could outpoint him with karate style fighting, but with the way Rodrigues fights and how aggressive he is, and the fact that he usually tends to force the issue and create chaos and force the under, I don't think he's going to give Duncan that outside comfortable point fighting style to secure like an easy decision. It's going to be a war, and that's why I like the under in Rodrigues. I just think he has more ways to win and more ways to potentially control the fight and slow it down too.
Any chance too, Billy, that CLD's got some home floor advantage here too?
Yeah, if it goes to a decision, which it's very unlikely to do. I think
Sure.
outside of the heavyweights, this is the likeliest card to end inside the distance
It's
by
about
a pretty
minus
wide
380,
margin.
yeah.
Yeah, so sure. I mean, but it probably doesn't matter. Sean, you said almost word for word how I broke this down, where if they stand and strike, Rodrigues isn't drawing dead, but he's a huge favorite as soon as it hits the mat. The one thing I will say, in a pure striking match, I think I would make Rodrigues probably less than 40% to win. Like if they put on big gloves and kickbox. If we knew this was going to be an MMA fight contested mostly on the feet, but CLD had to worry about takedowns the whole time, I think it'd be closer to 50-50.
Sure.
And that's going to be more the scenario here. We saw it with Rodrigues. He was getting pieced up by Brad Tavares in round 2 of their fight, landed a meaningless takedown at the end of round 2, and then came out in round 3 and looked way better on his feet. Well, why is that? It's not because his cardio is so good. It's because all of a sudden Tavares was like, oh no, I have to worry about that. I can't open up with big strikes. I can't be heavy on my front leg and checking stuff. I have to worry about the takedown. I think it's going to be a similar dynamic here where I need to see him land one early, even if he doesn't do too much with it, because it changes the whole dynamic of the striking after that as well. And yeah, I mean, it's as we were just saying with Arnold Allen, I'm getting plus 120 on a guy, betting on him to maybe be a little bit more aggressive or behave differently than he normally does. I'm fine with that at plus money. Wouldn't lay the juice on that. So love G-Rod here. I've been on him all week. It's one of the fights I'm looking most forward to as well. It should be pretty entertaining.
Yeah, this is another fight of the night candidate. It's a pretty good card. You know, there's
the
Aspinall Blaydes was our default fight of the night because it's an interim title bout, but there were 3 or 4 other fights that, had we been debating which one to choose for fight of the night, would have been in consideration for me. So this is one of them for sure.
It's a very good card. It's like half of an excellent card. It's like half a UFC 300, where there's some of the early prelims. It's like, well, it's getting a little rough here at the bottom. But yeah, if you want to tune in a little bit later for this one, it might be a good one to skip.
That's why they stuck Kape and Mokaev on the prelims as well. Spread it out a little bit.
There's your consensus dog, Gregory Rodrigues against CLD. Let's go to props. Zarilla, where are we finding value in the prop market?
Yeah, finally betting on an Englishman, Nathaniel Wood. Round 2, round 3, plus 430, plus 650 respectively. Then also maybe this fight to end inside the distance or the under, because Wood does get hurt in every fight. He doesn't have the best chin. He's a 135er, now fighting up at 145, where he's a little bit small. And his opponent, Daniel Pineda, is the bigger, stronger man. On paper, they have the same height, reach, but I think Pineda is more muscular. But Pineda is also 38 years old. He hasn't fought in 13 months. He's the guy traveling to face the hometown fighter. So a lot taken out of his sails here. And I would expect his cardio to be pretty bad in round 3. It's normally not good. Fighting off a 13-month layoff in your late 30s, like that gas tank ain't improving. So I think he's live to win inside the distance because Wood doesn't have a good chin, and Pineda has some nasty submission skills as well. Could see a club and sub, could see a straight knockout, but Pineda round 1 is how I'd bet him, 10-1. I think that would be the only way he wins consistently is a quick finish. After that point, though, Wood should take over, and he again is fighting up a weight class from where he used to, so speed advantage should be there, but also the cardio, the stamina, the ability to pour it on for 15 minutes. He does tend to be a little bit safer than most fighters. Doesn't really let it go as aggressively, tends to be more of a point fighter. But I do think Pineda is being fed to him as the guy who you are likeliest to finish based on the combination of, cardio discrepancy, but also just the chin relative to what Wood is actually capable of touching. The one thing that I do want to mention, just go back through Pineda's, I believe, his second stint in the UFC, go through his recent fights. They're either early finishes or he was getting, absolutely pummeled by Alex Caceres, who has no power late in round 3 of that fight. I think there's some refs who would have stepped in and stopped that one. He was on his way to getting finished by Andre Fili prior to a foul, and that fight turning into a no contest. So you just look back through his recent run in the UFC, it aligns with what you would expect. Everything either a Pineda finish or on his way to getting finished, if not dominated down the stretch. I think Wood round 3 is actually the likeliest outcome. Maybe even a Wood round 3 or by decision, but I'm going to play that Wood round 2 plus 430 and round 3 plus 650 respectively. And then maybe try to sprinkle in some fight ends inside the distance to cover myself in the event that Wood does get clipped in round 1. So Wood finish props, violence props in this fight. I think somebody ends it one way or another. Pineda earlier, Wood later.
And inside the distance has been the theme of this card so far. Billy, how about you for props?
Yeah, I'm going to go through mine pretty quick because I wanted to talk about Sean's. I just last night put in the round 3/decision bet on Nathaniel Wood. Did the full breakdown at Action Network, but see that almost 100% the same way. It's Pineda early. He's got some juice. Also tested positive for the juice on numerous occasions. Don't know how stringent the drug testing is now, but getting yourself all big and jacked up doesn't do wonders for the cardio, but it does make you more dangerous early. So all of those things along the same line. Other one I'm looking at, Sam Patterson versus Kiefer Crosbie, ends in KO, plus 185. I broke down Sam Patterson on the Contender Series like 2 years ago, and I was saying he's a big, tall guy, but his defense is to pull back here instead of tucking his chin and come in. See that a lot from guys who are used to always being taller than everyone. And then his first actual UFC fight, he just got absolutely obliterated. Chinny guy, he typically wins by submission, and he's a big favorite here, but he could pick up a TKO on the ground. He could use his reach to outpoint a much lower level competition. Just surprised to see plus 185 on the KO side of a fight that we expect to end inside the distance. And then the other one, fight I'm very much not looking forward to watching, Shauna Bannon versus Ardelean. I don't know. She just made it to the UFC. She is a internet model who was once a serious fighter, got absolutely destroyed by Weili Zhang, and then crushed some cans while building her online personality career. Shauna Bannon, just like a Taekwondo-style point fighter, not a ton of volume, very little power. I like that to end in split or majority decision at plus 350 because neither of them, I don't think, are going to do enough to convincingly win a round. Or any of the rounds, I should say. Like, it's just going to be a lot of, well, Alice held her against the fence for 4 minutes. Shauna did a cool spinning kick that barely grazed her. I don't know, give it to whoever you want. It's plus 350. Like, don't bet the house on that. But you need something to root for to care about that fight. So something fun like that, I think, is the way to go.
All right, and I think that's we're going to make our way to best bets. Do we have a final bet or a best bet, Sean?
I'm not sure. I guess it depends on the price that I get. Right now, Bobby Green, King Green, as he's changed his name, he went the Ocho Cinco route and officially changed his name. King Green, currently minus 115, but he opened minus 190 in this fight. So if I get plus money, if I get plus 120 on Bobby Green, it's absolutely a best bet. By the way, I'd love if he made his nickname Bobby and he went by King Bobby Green. Because Bruce Buffer getting to announce, like, saying, like, the King softly and then extending out the Bobby. Oh, that would be so good. So,
because now he is King
Green. Tell Bobby Green to please make his official nickname Bobby. Would be beautiful. But King Green, as I said, open minus 190 in this fight. I think that's the fair price, or I think that's at least closer to the fair price than minus 115 currently. Paddy somehow undefeated in the UFC. He's been gifted a number of soft matchups, many of which have not aged well. He was losing the end of round 3 to Tony Ferguson. If that had been a 5-round fight, not sure Paddy doesn't get finished there. And that's a bad look for Paddy Pimblett, considering the hype around him, everything. The biggest difference here is striking defense. Paddy defense strikes at 41%. He is horrible striking defense. No head movement, chin up way in the air, just free to be hit all day. And Bobby defense strikes at 62%. Uses the shoulder roll. It's not as, it doesn't look as effective as 62% because he uses the shoulder roll. He's, shaking his head, waving his finger when you do touch the shoulder. But from the judge's cage side, they still hear the impact on the shoulder. They still hear the sound of it. And if his back is turned to you, you don't really know if it hit the chin or not. So Bobby tends to get in a lot of close decisions with very thin margins because of those antics and because he does fight to his level of competition. But in terms of this matchup, I think Bobby is just a better version of Jared Gordon. In terms of the striking and the way this fight's going to play out, he has enough defensive grappling to keep the fight standing. Gordon is the better offensive grappler, but that wasn't going to happen against Paddy. Paddy is the bigger, stronger athlete, but way lesser cardio. And after 5 minutes, Bobby takes over this fight at a very consistent degree. So if you like Paddy round 1, Bobby 2 fights removed from that awful knockout against Jalen Turner where he was KO'd like 4 times and the ref didn't stop it. He got hurt early in his last fight against Jim Miller, but then rallied and just poured on volume on Miller down the stretch and showed that the speed isn't gone. You know, the KO didn't take away the athleticism, didn't take away the speed, the coordination. It's all still there. He looked tremendous across that fight. So I love Bobby Green live after round 1 here. I think you're going to get a great price live after round 1 because it's going to be a competitive round 1, and that competitive round likely goes to Paddy. Paddy may land takedowns. You know, the combination of the grappling and the striking and the overall effectiveness may give him the round. But I think Bobby rallies here at a very consistent clip if he does not get finished. So I like his odds to win in round 3, 15-1. I think there's a chance he gets a late finish. I would bet probably round 3 or decision props as well. And then it's live price. But I'm just going to wait on that money line for now. Open -190, down to -115. I think it gets the plus money by fight days. More parlays, straight bets, etc. Get tied up on Paddy. If you want my half kidding take of the week, this card starting at 3 a.m. local time on the main card. The prelims starting at 11 p.m. Eastern time, or sorry, I should say 11 p.m. local time. It's absurd. So there's a chance that, you know, more time throughout the day, more money to come in on these fights, that some of these Brits just get steamed up to pretty insane degrees. And I think Paddy Pimblett is certainly one of the ones whose price could continue to go up or continue to tick in his favor. So yeah, I think Bobby pours the volume on him down the stretch here. And, you know, Jared Gordon, the strike differential ultimately in that fight was about 3-4 strikes. I think Bobby doubles him up. You know, this is 100 to 60 on strikes, or, you know, 110 to 60 on strikes. So I think he makes it clear. I think he wins rounds 2 and rounds 3 pretty clear, as long as he doesn't get finished early.
Billy, you want to weigh in here because you've got Pimblett actually as an undervalued fighter right now at the current price against Mr. King Green.
Well, I'm going to correct you slightly. Not at the current price, when he was still plus money, which you can't get on Pimblett.
Fair enough.
It's important with this fight. It's tough because based on resume, it's obviously King Green. My favorite bit all week, by the way, has been pretending not to know who people are talking about when they say Bobby Green, because there's no fighter named Bobby Green anymore. But yeah, on resume, it's obviously King Green. He's right. He's done more. He's looked better against better competition. He'll be 38 in a month and a half. He's flying all the way to England. Not a guy who's always known for taking his preparation the most seriously. Anyway, Pimblett looks a lot better physically, at least in this fight. It's the last fight of his deal. He's trying to make some money, trying to increase himself. The potential's always been there for Paddy, especially with the grappling, when he takes himself seriously, when he has the cardio, when he has the training. And also, my half-kidding take, if we're fighting at 4 a.m. in the morning local time, I want to bet on the guy who just had twins 2 months ago and is getting up at 4 a.m. all the time anyway, which would be Paddy Pimblett. Plus, we got the dad strength angle, so there's a little bit to it. I'm with Sean, though. If you see plus 120 on King Green, by all means, right? Like, that's obviously the better bet. I'd love to walk into this fight with plus money tickets on both guys. Don't lay juice on Paddy. I wouldn't lay juice on Green either, but that's my take on it.
Okay, great. And to your point, you did say that you took Paddy at plus money earlier in the week, and that obviously is gone. Okay, very good. And by the way, I think a lot of the sports books still have him named as Bobby. Like, they haven't made that adjustment yet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's important for people to understand that, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, when you're betting on Bobby Green, you are in fact betting on King Green. So.
All right, Billy, take us home. What's your final bet? Best bet?
Yeah, go through this one pretty quick because I did do the full breakdown so anyone can read. But I like Muhammad Mokaev at -155 against Manel Kape. My kind of conspiracy theory this week, this fight was moved from the main card to the featured prelim, to the early prelim, and a bunch of money came in on Mokaev. Again, my kind of conspiracy theory here is that something's going on with Kape. He's injured, wasn't going to make weight, whatever. He made weight. We got that information. Doesn't mean he's full strength. Sometimes we see these things in MMA betting where you see a ton of steam on a guy and some weird stuff is happening. But also, I just like the wrestling and the strategy from Mokaev. He's really good. This is going to sound stupid until I explain it. He's really good at winning fights. Like, he does what he needs to do to make sure he wins the fight. And as long as he doesn't need a knee up the middle from Kape, I think he's in a good position to do so. Kape is clearly the better striker, clearly more powerful, way too big for flyweight, which is why he's had so much trouble making weight. But Kape's a counter striker. So against a guy who's not going to really come after him with strikes, I think if you're Kape, you got to either kind of just sit back and wait to land a knee or an uppercut on the shot is your best bet. That's tricky to do. People always say, well, why don't you just knee him when he shoots? It's really hard. Like, we don't see it that often for a reason. Don't love laying the juice on Mokaev because he was a much better price at various points since this fight was announced. On the other hand, if that much money is coming in on Mokaev, it might tell you something.
Okay, very good. There you go. There's your UFC 304 betting breakdown. All goes down in England this coming weekend. Again, keep an eye on those times. I mean, Eastern times are fine for us, but the local times, it's important to throw into your handicaps, as you guys have noted, especially for Mr. King Green, who's old.
Yeah, no body clock advantage for the British fighters either when you really think about it. You know, a lot of times they go over to...
That's a good point.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia or whatever, and the Russian fighters, the fighters from Asia, they have the body clock advantage. There's really no body clock advantage for the local fighters here. So just something to consider as these British fighters, Irish fighters continue to steam up. They don't have the typical rest, etc. advantages that they normally would. They do have the travel advantage. You know, that's flying over. That takes a little bit out of your gas tank, I would imagine, for the Americans. But yeah, the body clock thing is not going to be an issue this time.
Well, it's tough because some of the American fighters, they're like, well, we're fighting at normal time. I can stay on my normal rhythm. But it's then you flew out 2 weeks ago, and now you're adjusting to the different time zone. Really interesting article by our former contributor, Ben Folks, on that, where he interviewed some of these guys. So go check. I think it's important to know. And he notes kind of the discrepancies between someone like Leon Edwards, who hired a sleep coach 6 weeks ago or whatever. And some guys are like, wait, it's at what time? When he asked him. So, you know, that should probably factor into your handicapping as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there's fighters who rolled up this week and are like, I'm fighting at 3 a.m. Fighting at 3 a.m. What do you mean? Yeah. The preparation from some of these athletes is not at the level that you would expect it to be sometimes. And just in regards to basic information, such as what time am I fighting? So would
still not
be
as
shocked if
serious
there
as
wasn't
sport.
a fighter who had that reaction this week.
Oh, yeah.
All right, very good. You can find Zerillo and Billy Ward in the free award-winning Action Network app, especially for some of those live plays, anything they might add leading into Saturday. You can find more UFC betting content as well from these guys or other contributors over at the Action Network website and as well in the Action Network app. For Billy Ward, Sean Zerillo, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for tuning in to another UFC betting preview here on the Action Network podcast. We are presented by BetMGM. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you next time.